Okay, welcome back to the podcast. This is episode number 168 with my guest, Andy Neils. Andy is a steel drum tuner and builder living in Trinidad and Tobago. And I come across Andy on Facebook. He has a Facebook page called PanMax Studios, and I sort of got the impression he's a really big advocate in addition to being a tuner, but his advocacy is really specific about unique instruments built by tuners, older tuners in Trinidad, very specific hybrid instruments, things like that. And it was really fascinating, and I just wanted to talk to him. And I'm really glad I did. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with steel drum tuner and builder Andy Neils. All right, take care. Talk to you soon. Bye. Okay, let's gavel this to order. Andy Neils, I really appreciate you doing this. Am I saying your name correctly?
Andy Neils, yes.
Andy Neils. And just before we get into your background a little bit here, we've never met personally, I don't believe. Is that correct? Or have we crossed paths in Brooklyn or Trinidad?
I don't think we ever met, no.
Okay. I've been involved a lot with Kendall Williams music. He was a student of mine at NYU, and then he sort of introduced me to the Brooklyn panorama scene, and that's how I've gotten to know a lot of the people in BSO and Chasm and Crossfire and all those folks. But I've seen your name come across my Facebook feed hundreds of times in the last 5 or 6 years. And every time you do, I'm always like, oh man, I want to talk to that guy. I've never met him, but you seem to be someone who is sort of a historian, or you have a historical sort of conservational approach to who you talk to and why. I feel like you do a really good job of saying, like, this is someone who built an amazing steel pan, a version of this pan that never existed anywhere else in the world other than right here in this man's home, and we are going to watch him play it and talk about it. And I love that sort of approach to history and talking about the lineage of this instrument. So that's all I know about you, and I'm sure that's even just a very surfacey sort of scratching of you. But and we're not going to get to everything in an hour here. But I'm curious, Andy, if you can just start a little bit by telling me a little bit about who you are, where you came from, and what got you into doing what you're doing.
Well, I began playing pan at the age of like 16 years old. I started in school. I went on to playing with Renegades. I played there for like 20 years.
So you're from Trinidad?
Yes, I live in Trinidad, yes.
Okay.
All right, so I played with Renegades for like 20 years. We toured extensively. We went to France, to Japan, to the US, Caribbean countries and stuff like that. And then I told myself, I need something more in the steel band. Mm-hmm. So I look at the two fields of the arranger and the tuner, and I told myself I want to be either one of these, you know. Mm. So I started learning music along with learning to make pan and stuff like that. So I became an arranger. I arranged for like the single pan bands in Trinidad. I did about 5 panoramas, single pan arranger, and then concurrently I was doing the tuning, you know, learning to make pan and tune pan. Mm. So when I eventually was proficient in tuning pans, I left the arranging and started concentrating on tuning only. You know, and guys would see me and they say, "But I thought you was an arranger," you know.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but and pardon, please, Andy, and anyone who knows you, and pardon my ignorance on a lot of your background. Again, we've never met, and I'm just sort of discovering a lot of stuff about you. So, I knew Cliff Alexis really well, and you know, in the steel pan tuning world, there's a whole bunch of, you know, there's some pretty nominal names at the top who are sort of the fathers of this instrument. You know, Anthony Williams, Ellie Bennett, Cliff Alexis, and I'm curious for you, who got you into tuning? Who was the person that sort of said, you can do this, and I'm going to show you how?
As I said, I wanted to get into either the tuning or the arranging. So when I started, the guy who was really instrumental in bringing me into form was Lincoln Noel.
Yeah.
You know, when I met Lincoln Noel, I was already doing a little stuff, and he kind of fine-tuned me in that kind of way. He took me to Desperados, and he had me tune the guitar pans, all the guitar pans in Desperados. You know, so that was like a dream to me, you know.
Lincoln, I met him, I met him once, and it was in 2002. I was 20 or 21 years old, and I was at the University of Akron in Ohio, and Bugsy Sharp was a guest artist at my school there, and he invited me to come down and play in Phase 2, and I played in Phase 2 in 2002. They did Do What You Want, and Lincoln came in and tuned a few of the bass pans, and I remember standing over his shoulder, and I had no idea. I was 21 years old and was like lived in a cornfield, so I had no idea who any of these people were, you know. And he took a bass pan that had a huge hole rusted right through the middle of it, and made it sound better than any bass pan I've ever seen in my entire life. And I was like,
All right.
what? This man is a magician. How does he know how to do this? You know? But that was my first introduction to Lincoln Noel. And so, and he played. Was he a main tuner for one of the bands that you worked with? Who was he?
Pardon me?
Who did he tune? Who was he a main tuner for?
Lincoln?
Yeah.
He was the main tuner for Desperados.
Okay.
And he tuned extensively with a lot of bands, you know.
And so, and can you talk about a little bit as a kid growing up in Trinidad? So, what town? You live in Port of Spain, or where do you live in Trinidad?
I grew up in Laventille area.
Laventille, right. Okay. And
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it always had pan around, so I was always interested in playing pan, you know. But I never got close to a steel band until like about 16 years old.
Really? Yeah. Was there a reason you didn't? Was there a reason where your parents didn't let you? I mean, I've read a lot of anecdotes about like growing up in the steel band as a young kid was, you know, not good.
My parents was kind of okay with the steel band. It's just that as a kid, I probably wasn't adventurous enough.
Oh, okay. Well, what do you mean? What was there something that it scare you, or were you just like worried, or what?
No, there wasn't. It's just like I always wanted to do it because I always see it, you know, from a distance. There was no pan yard in close proximity, so you don't have to venture and go out of the area. Because Desperados was, although I'm from Laventille, Desperados was way up the hill. I am from a little lower down the hill, so I had to climb quite up the hill. So it was like venturing out of my comfort zone, you know.
Well, and for folks who have never been to Trinidad, I've been to Trinidad 3 or 4 times, but I've never been to Laventille, and I know I now know you, who lives in Laventille, but I know Anthony Phillip, Gums, I think is what his nickname, and he lives up there as well. I think his dad owns a store or something, and I've never been brave enough to go up to Laventille, and I've you know, but it's like that's the home of one of the most legendary steel bands in all of in the world, and it's my dream is to go up to Laventille sometime and check out a rehearsal and just sort of see that vibe.
But you know, mind you, as I said, I grew up in Laventille, but I don't live in Laventille now, you know.
Oh, okay, all right. I
live in Barataria now.
Ah, okay, all right. Well, if I come back, I'll still call you and say, can we go to Laventille? I'll call anybody I can.
Yeah, maybe yes.
Well, can you talk a little bit about just the different? I mean, growing up in Trinidad, seeing these bands in the time when you did was sort of like. When were you born? Remind me.
The year?
Yeah.
1966.
I mean, 63 is when the first Panorama happened with Pan Am North Stars. And so for you as a child growing up, can you just talk a little bit about what it was like to grow up in the Panorama scene in its infancy?
Well, as I said, I wasn't exposed to the pan in that kind of way. But I would say anytime there is Panorama in the Savannah, my father would have the television and the radio on. So even though you don't like pan, you will get pan. And those days, the preliminary used to run for like the entire day, from like 10 a.m. until like 3 in the next morning. So we would have that television and that radio, and it's pan whole day. You know? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so then when you were 16, what band did you join? Was it Desperados or Renegades?
I was going down Duke Street side. And I passed through Barcelona Street, where we call it Crashaya there, and I saw some guys playing. That was Syncopators, City Syncopators. All right. Unfortunately, the band didn't go to Panorama that year, but I got there. I wasn't going to Pan, you know. I saw them, and I just stood there from about 6 p.m. until they finished practice about 11 o'clock that night, without even touching our pan, you know. And the next day, I was so excited. I'm waiting on the time to come back to go in that pan yard, you know. So I was there playing the pan yard again, and I go and I stood in the same place by a tenor man. And the guy made a mistake and said, "Look, small man, look the sticks." So when he handed me the sticks now, I played the entire song for him. So he watched me in amazement. He said, come, I'm going to teach you pan, you know. And that was it for me.
Do you know who that man was? Do you remember what his name was?
I don't remember his name at all. Because as I said, the band didn't go panorama that year. So after about 2 weeks of practice, everybody just dispersed. And that was the last of Syncopators.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of my first time in Phase 2's yard, and there were two gentlemen who showed me the tune for the first, the entire time. For the first 3 days, there was a guy named Almond St. Rose and another gentleman, Earl Charles, who showed me the tune for 3 days in a row, just note by note. And I'll never forget that song. I think I could, if I got my double seconds out now, I could probably still play it, still sing it note for note. And I will never forget those two guys. The last couple times I've been to Trinidad, like I've made a point to sort of like say hello to Earl, and it's like I feel like I'm right back in 2002 learning that tune note for note. It's an experience. I feel like everybody, whether you're from Trinidad or you're a foreigner, you should have that experience because it's like nothing else in the world. Well, can I ask you a little bit? So you, I want to learn more about your tuning because when I said earlier that I feel like you do a good job of historically cataloging important people in the field, and they're folks that I just I don't know because again I came from Ohio and I have a very limited experience with a lot of the people that you do. Can you talk about tuning in particular and some of the stuff you've been posting recently? There was a gentleman, I cannot remember his name. You were in his living room, I believe, and there was a whole bunch of pans. One was
Jomo.
Say it one more time.
Jomo Watus. Yeah.
And he had a humongous pan, and there was another one that had sort of the rocket pans from Desperados, had the resonator on it. Can you just talk a little bit about? Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that side of your interest and sort of why do that? Why hang out in someone's house and show all these weird pans that are being made? What makes you do that?
What happened is that I saw Jomo Watus. He obtained a patent in 2020, May this year. All right, and I was interested in the process in which he was going to sink hydrosyncing.
What's hydrosyncing?
That's he's sinking the blanks with a machine with water under pressure.
So is it a hammer that's hitting the metal, or is it actual water?
It's actual water.
Whoa! I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, so
that's rad.
He just got a patent, so I didn't even get a chance to see the actual process, right?
Yeah.
I just saw he produced like 7 pans, and I saw 2 of them. But in his living room, he have other inventions. Because he's an inventor, he's been inventing since 1966, he told me. That's the year I was born. All right. So you have this elliptical pan, large elliptical pan. We call it a Jomoline. And the conical shape that you talk about, that's the Venturi pan. That's like a speaker system. That's like amplifying a pan. You put your pan on that, and there's some USB port and stuff like that. You can put your music in. So you don't have to have a speaker. With this Venturi thing, you just put your pan on it, and you play. Amplification. It's so nice.
It has a USB port?
Yeah.
We need to there needs to be like a world organization for pan inventors, and he needs to be the president. I mean, that's amazing. Like a steel pan with a USB. I mean, there's the E-pan is something I feel like that's the thing that when people talk about electronics and pan or something like that, they think the E-pan really quick. But just a regular, that's amazing. I don't know. I need to look into this. Jomo, is that his name?
Jomo Watus. Yeah.
I need to dig into him a little bit.
85 years old, you know.
How much?
85.
Well, this leads me to something. When you talk about you mentioned he's an inventor. I mean, the steel pan is an invention. I mean, it was invented in Trinidad, and in the early 1900s through the 40s is sort of when it was sort of morphing and evolving into what we now call what's sitting behind you on those shelves. Can you just talk a little bit about that? It's the thing that I feel is glossed over a lot when we talk about the history of the pan. We talk, it's found instruments, and it's a resourceful culture that's dealing with oppression, and they're reacting against the oppression. All of that is true in many respects, but the inventive, the creativity, the willingness, and still currently the desire to constantly innovate, to me, I think, is something uniquely Trinidadian that I'm curious if you as a tuner can sort of talk about that. Like when you're tuning a pan, you're building something from scratch every time, and it's unique. It's not the same as any other pan that's ever been built. Can you just talk about that for a second?
Yeah. I'm not sure exactly what you want to talk about, but I can.
I'm not very good at asking questions, Andy. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Just talk about the sort of inventive, like the way we talk about Thomas Edison and the light bulb. I would say people like Jomo or Anthony Williams or Spree Simon or Ellie Minette, Cliff Alexis, yourself. In terms of the steel pan, there's something unique about it. I'm just curious if you can sort of, maybe from your vantage point, talk about what it means to be an inventor or a creator.
Well, the steel pan is pretty young, you know. It's not even 80 years old yet, you know.
Yeah.
So we in Trinidad, we know that the steel pan has a long way to go. So like myself, I tried little inventions. So I came up with a style base that I want to put on the market soon.
A what base? Right?
A style base.
What is that?
A different style base.
Oh, yeah, but what kind? Like how?
But it hasn't been released yet, so I can't tell you.
Okay. Keep it secret. Keep it under wraps.
In the near future, you can do the interview and we can do it.
Okay.
All right. So guys like Jimmy Phillip, he's an inventor also. Jomo does a lot of stuff. Now there was inventors. How I would say, there used to be a competition for inventions every year.
Mm. All right. In Trinidad?
In Trinidad, yeah.
Okay.
But for the past 20 years or so, there hasn't been any. So that's why guys like Jimmy Phillip and Jomo and stuff like that come up with different things. And when the competition pass, I mean, the ideas are still there. So the ideas still keep flowing, you know?
Why do you think that sort of died off?
I think it's probably funding.
I mean, because I think of if you, I don't know much about tech companies, but I know that I know some people who they still have coding competitions where they're all just get in a room and it's a sort of free for all. Like everybody's just coding and coding and coding just to sort of compete against each other. And I feel like that's what you're talking about with the steel band world. Like if there was a month out of the year where we just threw every pan tuner in a factory and said, just come up with crazy stuff, like
come up with something.
Yeah, it would be. Well, where do you see the? So there's where pan is like today on July 28th or whatever today is, like
27th.
27th. Good. We get an extra day back. What are you bummed about with the current sort of situation of pan, and where are you trying to take it? What do you think needs innovated?
One of the things I am kind of perturbed about with the steel pan is how would I say it? The popularity. You know, I think the steel pan has been around just under 75 years or so. And half of the world don't know what the steel pan is still. Or half is being generous. You know, maybe 3/4 of the world still don't know what a steel pan is. So that's one of the reasons why I got on Facebook. And I started doing catalogs, you know, exposing different things, bringing different things to the forefront and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing I would like to see, the steel pan being popularized worldwide, you know?
Well, I'll say in my experience, I mean, like I said, I joke about growing up in a cornfield. I mean, I didn't choose to grow up in a cornfield. That's just where I was born, you know? And and I was very fortunate that my high school band director, she was my elementary school band director too. Her name was Joan Wenzel. She was really good with friends with Cliff Alexis, and she bought the very first set of steel drums he ever built when he moved to the United States in the 60s, late 60s. And she just so happened to move to Dover, Ohio, where I went to school, and started a steel band. And I remember being in those concerts and her saying, how many in here know where the steel drum comes from? And like 3 people would raise their hand. And this was 1994. And now the whole audience raises its hand. And, you know, even so, every once in a while, like 10 years ago, when I would start teaching, some people would be like, I'd say, where do you think the steel drum is from? And some people would say Hawaii or Texas or Jamaica or, you know, I'd be like, or they would say Jamaica. And I would say, well, you know, you're close. Just keep going south. You keep going down. Actually,
you'd be south.
You'd be closer if you said south. If you said Brazil, actually, and they're like, what? And then I say Trinidad and Tobago, and I would say that knowledge is getting more and more common. People are now sort of starting to be more aware of its origins, but I think you're right. It is still a relatively it's growing, and I think your and my responsibility is to just keep shining a light on it, which is what I feel, which is why I wanted to reach out to you to begin with, because I feel like you have a huge light and you just keep shining it on awesome stuff. And
yeah, man, thank you.
And I think that's you know, that's important. That's kind of one of the only, it's for me, that's the best way to get it out there, especially now with social media. But there was a pan, I don't know if it was Jomo, but it was a set of double seconds, and they were gold, and they had like these little weird, it looked like little prongs on the rim, around the rim. And I cannot remember who built them or who was playing them, and I think it was you that posted a video about it, but I could be mistaken. Do you remember that?
There was a Rasta guy playing them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were those pans?
It's a double second pan.
But just a regular set of double seconds?
A regular set, yeah.
Okay. What the metal prongs? They weren't. Did they do anything?
I'm not sure if I'm talking about the same instrument that you're speaking about.
Okay, we may not be, and I'll just we'll just agree that I've got the wrong person on here. But I apologize for that. So what are you working on right now? You said you were working on a set of bass, and we'll keep that under wraps for a second. But in terms of innovating the instrument itself, where do you feel the instrument itself needs to grow in the way it's constructed, the way it sounds, those sorts of things?
One of the most important things is standardization. You need to have standards. Just like if you go to let's say you live in Ohio, you said, right?
Mm-hmm. I grew up. I live in Connecticut now.
All right. So let's say you go to Kentucky or Missouri, and you don't have an instrument, and a guy say, "Hey, come on, play with us." You know, you can bring out a guitar and say, "Look, what do you play? A bass guitar? All right." You bring a bass, and you can just tune it up and play. So I think the steel band needs to be like that. If you go to, let's say you go to Japan, and someone says, "Hey, we need a player for a second pan," and the guy bring a second pan and say, "No, my second pan is so we need some standards, I think."
Well, who do you think that do you think it's getting better in terms of standardization?
Yes, I really do think it's getting better. Yeah.
And who's, I mean, I'm just sort of asking dumb questions here, so please just tell me to shut up. But like, whose responsibility do you think it is to demand and then also actually implement standardization? As a teacher, I feel I have ethical sort of responsibilities. I feel I have, but I'm just curious for you, who do you feel has the most power in that world to make it standard?
I am like you. I am just like you in that. I am trying to figure out as well who has the power to do this, because we in Trinidad, a lot of people say Pan Trimbago. Some people say no, not Pan Trimbago, the government. So it's just like everybody just deferring, you know.
Well, how much responsibility do you feel like it is just for the? I mean, the more conversations I have with people who tune and build, I mean, I work with Kyle Dunleavy in Philadelphia a lot. Do you know Kyle at all?
Yes, I met Kyle a couple of times.
He's a really nice guy and a really great tuner and builder.
Yes.
And he's talked, even within his layout, I mean, I've known him now for 15 years, and even in the last 15 years, his personal layouts have sort of slowly landed on a certain thing where, like, 10 years ago, I could buy a set of his double seconds, and if I bought a set 5 years later, the G sharp now that was on the rim would now be in the middle, because he's learned about tuning, or for him, he's learned what makes the sound the way he wants it to make, and that's now become standardized. But it's only been within the last like 8 years where those layouts have. Now, if I bought a set of double seconds, I know exactly what I'm going to get from him, and I wonder if we're in this space right now, where tuners don't know what the standard should be because they're still trying to all figure out how the metal works best. I mean, this is a process that's going to take a long time because metal isn't standard. 55-gallon oil barrels aren't standardized.
But, you know, it's interesting that what you said, like with Kyle, now they have something unique and different to what we have. And, you know, in Trinidad, right, where I practice a lot, if somebody come to me for a double second pan, they would say they want it like this. But what Kyle and probably the tuners out in the world outside Trinidad,
Mm-hmm.
you know, somebody could say, well, somebody would probably say, I want a second plan. And you could say, all right, this is what my style is. And I recommend this. And they would probably go with it. But, you know, in Trinidad, if somebody come to you, they already play a particular pattern.
Yeah, yeah.
And if a steel band come to you, they want to replicate what they have as well.
Right, right.
So that's why I mentioned, you know, they have a unique. I would like to do that, you know, but the what you mentioned there, the note on the rim, some of those notes on the rim would be better off inside. You know.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting. I mean, that's something. I'm glad you mentioned the sort of differences between Trinidad and in just in my experience in the United States in terms of how tuners the economy in which tuners work are just different culturally in Trinidad than they are in the United States. In the United States, just because culturally we didn't grow up with the steel drum, I didn't grow up with a tuner living next door to me. You know, I saw a tuner once a year, and it was like a unicorn flew into town, and everybody was like, you know, whoa, the tuner's here, and that's how I met Cliff. And but you know, my first time being in Trinidad, and I see all the drums sitting outside, and I'm like, whoa, I would never do that, because if my drums got damaged, I'd have to wait a year before I got to see Cliff. And then you realize, oh, of course, Boogsy's friend lives right down the street, and he can come and tune a drum if it gets knocked out of tune or whatever. Yeah. But also, being in the home country, you know, Trinidad and Tobago, where this was invented, from the beginning, since Ellie Minette with, you know, the Oval Boys and Invaders and all, you know, those original bands, it was all, hey, can you build this for me? You know, and like you said, we're only 80 years out from that. So just culturally, it's hard. You can't stop that train from going, you know? So like, I understand, I empathize with, it's interesting that you bring that up, and that makes total sense to me. But it is something that, you know, Kyle just never has to deal with, because he doesn't have a steel band down the street. You know, he's got a school that is looking to buy a set of drums or something. Well, yeah, and I guess in Trinidad, like, can you tell me, I've heard this, I don't know if it's true, but like Renegades, for example, versus All Stars, the way their lead lines are set up, like the pattern, what's the layout of a Renegade's lead pan, by and large?
The original Renegades lead pan was like what they call turns. Mm-hmm. But Renegades now have like 90% fourth and fifth.
Okay.
All bands in Trinidad and Tobago now has like 90 to 99% fourth and fifth.
And what about... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, All Stars had an original set, lead set as well. They as well phasing it out. They go into fourth and fifth. Now, what actually happened with these bands, right? Long ago, there was like a particular tuner for a particular band, and every tuner would have their different layout of leads. Mm-hmm. So that's why bands end up with different leads.
Right, you got the Invader style lead. You got thirds. You know,
Desperados and Renegades have a similar style, with just like 2 notes difference.
Right, and I was talking with, do you know Quent Rose?
Yes, I know Quent Rose.
I did a podcast with Quent, and I was telling him, I said, you know, I was every time I go to Trinidad and I hear All Stars play, and the whole crowd goes bonkers when they play super high, and they're just like these raging lines, and I was just like, why does no other band, how can no other band get that sound? And Quent's like, oh, it's because their lead pans only go down to E flat, so they have more high notes. And I was like, oh, of course, like that makes total sense. You've got an instrument that just goes higher than everybody, but it didn't dawn on me that every band has its own sound, because its tuner builds the drums slightly differently.
Yeah, it was like that in the past, but it's now coming like everyone has the same.
Well, let me ask this then, to play the devil's advocate. Isn't that going to kind of suck? That every band is going to sound the same now? Like, isn't it kind of awesome that All Stars had a thing that no one else had?
I think so, yeah. I think so.
And so, because like, this is... Go ahead, sir.
All Stars had this unique song, according to what you said, you know. And they would woo you with that, you know.
Yeah, and if that goes away... And if you go down south, you go to Skiffle Bunch, for example. Yeah. Like, that band also has a sound because of the G-pans that no other band is able to get. You know? And it's, you know, it's different. It's not better or worse. It's just a different vibe. Yeah. And if all of a sudden, like, let's say Pan Trinbago comes in and they're like, okay, we're going to standardize it. Every band is going to have the same layout, same exact drums, and we're going to put $8 billion to build all these drums, and tuners are going to be hired all over the country. I'm never going to weigh in that. That's not my place to weigh in on. But if you asked me in private, I would say that's a terrible idea. Because like we should hire tuners, but like it consolidates the sound and makes it every band unique or not unique anymore. And so I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate here, like to push back against a little bit the idea that every band should be standardized, because that's what makes it unique. But I'm only playing devil's advocate, so take that for what it's worth.
But you know, even if everything is standard, you will still get that deviation in sound because each tuner has a different way of tuning.
Yeah.
Not a different way of tuning, but everybody here is different. Totally. So some people might be comfortable with a particular song, and then a next tuner wouldn't be comfortable with that. I don't know if you're catching me.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. I mean, that's what little I've sat down with Kyle or Cliff. There was another guy named Moon that I knew in my undergrad. Like every tuner had, like, you place harmonics in certain spots. So just like a piano or a guitar or anything else that's handmade, there's a difference between a Les Paul and a Fender, you know, like, because those two things were made by different people and with different sort of exacting standards. But
and they would have different acceptance as well. They would accept a note at a different level.
Right. Well, is there any movement? I mean, one of the things that scares me a little bit, like when Cliff passed, or Ellie passed first, and then Cliff Alexis passed, and I had this tinge of guilt and regret that I didn't get Cliff or Ellie on the record more. I did a podcast with Cliff, and I'm really glad I did. It was about 6 months before he passed. But for you, is there any organization to sort of, or any movement to sort of not consolidate, but help tie together and network all of the tuners as sort of like in the way that there's Pantramego for steel bands, men and women that play and organize? I feel like the tuners, you all are a team, but you know, you are the most important part of this. If all of you just decided to, or if there was some virus that came through and only killed pan tuners, steel drums would go away in about 50 years. Like, you know, so for you, can you talk a little bit about that side of things? Like, what is the organization or the mindset of tuners right now and your importance in the field?
So are you talking about an organization internationally or just in Trinidad?
Either. Both.
Oh. Well,
maybe just start with Trinidad, just because that's where you are and you know most about that scene.
Yeah, we have in Trinidad what we call the Pan Tuners Guild.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Where we try to get everybody together. But in Trinidad, the art form of tuning is much like the panorama. It's more like a competition, you know. So it's kind of difficult to get everybody to come together because everybody's still competing with each other. Because when a guy tuning for Renegades and the next guy tuning for Desperados and the next guy tuning for All Stars, the competition is there still, you know.
Yeah.
So
I wish we could have a conference where we, like, let's just get a humongous convention center somewhere, fly every steel band in the world, and everybody just sets up, and every tuner is there, and it's a huge, like, football field sized room, and we just hang out and talk and show each other, like, try to remove the
competition.
The competition or the fear of your art form being stolen, because that, you know, appropriation is a real thing. Thievery is a real thing. And I know specifically in Trinidad with regards to some organizations from the United States that I won't mention, but it's a real thing. And I understand it, and I totally empathize with it and get it. But I also, like Cliff, I mean, when I would have conversations with Cliff, there were things where he would be like, I will never show anybody this. And I'm like, but Cliff, you're not going to be Cliff. You know, like a secret. Come on, bro. It's me. And he's like, I will never tell anybody. And I was like, anything, Cliff. And I understand he's well within his rights to have that feeling because he had stuff stolen for him. And so to me, like, is that part of any of the equation for tuners in the in Trinidad? Does that enter the equation at all? Not just competition amongst yourself, but just fear or worry about foreigners or outside.
Yes, I think that's a major concern with tuners because a lot of the tuners who has passed, Trinidad tuners who has passed, like Leo Coca, Guppy, who was super, you know. They died with their secret, whatever secret they had, you know. And to me, I think that doesn't make sense at all. I want to show someone or two, three, four people everything that I know, you know. I've started teaching 4 people this year for first time. Yeah. So I'm gonna do it again probably in 2 years, probably biannually or something like that.
Yeah.
So I began just last month. My son is included with 3 other people. Yeah.
And is your son regretting signing up for a class with his dad?
Well, my son have been telling me, Daddy, I want to learn to tune for the past 5 years or so. And the last time he told me was sometime last year. And I said, son, don't ever tell me that again. If you want to learn to tune, just present yourself in the workshop.
That's the best advice. I mean, there's only so much you can do before before that person has to just come in the room and be there and pick up the hammer. Well, and what have you learned about, I mean, first of all, you should start like an institute and you can do this online. You could probably have people all over the world who sign up for like, let's just do a 4-day workshop of like the basics of Andy Neal's approach to building pan. And like, of course, I mean, it's taken you your whole life. No one's going to get everything in 4 days. But if your knowledge can start getting out there, don't underestimate how many people worldwide you could get. You have 4 in Trinidad or 5 in Trinidad. You would have a lot if you got it organized and could advertise it worldwide. I think you could do that.
But mind you, those 4 people in Trinidad, they are pretty lucky because after I advertised that I have 4 students, I've got a lot of calls, a lot of messages. Dozens of people want to be a part of it.
That's a good problem to have, bro. I mean, that's awesome that you're doing it. And I'm curious though, for you as a teacher now that you're like, you know, when you're studying pan building and you were a student of it, learning from Lincoln and growing up, what have you learned as a teacher teaching for students who have zero, you know, like from ground? What is the thing where you're like, oh wow, I totally underestimated how hard this part of it was going to be to teach?
It's something I've been looking forward to for a very long time, you know. And I will tell you this much: since I've started teaching these 4 people, it kind of re-educated me in tuning. Some of the things that I've probably forgotten, I'm now getting it back inside, you know. So it's even sharpening me up now.
Well, that's like somebody described teaching to me like as like if you know, you are an axe, right? And your students are your stone. And every time you think you're sharp and you're sharper than them by and large because you've been doing it your whole life. But then you get in there and you're like, oh, wow, I'm grinding up against this stone that is just blunt and doesn't know what it's doing. But you have to be sharper then. You actually realize, oh, man, like this thing I've been taking for granted. When you tune a harmonic or you look at a piece of metal and you know that metal is flowing over time, slowly changing like water, but just like a big block of ice that just glacially moves and changes. Like a pan that you build in 1985 is not the same pan that in 2020. You have to treat it differently. It's aged now. It's patina. Yeah. It's got a different vibe, and that's something you've learned. And I think when you get up against a student who's like, "Oh, I sunk it, so it's good," right? Like all of a sudden you have to be like, "Oh God, you have no idea." This is going to take you years, and you're going to be on this same pan, and you're going to finish it and be like, I've wasted all my time. This sounds terrible. What am I doing? And so I think sharpening your axe against the student, the stone of what a student actually is as a teacher is the most revealing thing. Yeah.
As I say, I'm getting sharper.
That's good. Well, let me just ask you a couple final follow-up or a couple follow-up final questions.
One thing before I go on. When we was talking about Jomo Watus, that's the inventor. He invented the xylopan. That's with the tenor pan inside, and then you have like 6 other pans coming around. It's kind of humongous. What I have suggested to him is that we take the xylopan out from his home and bring it where people can come. If people come to Trinidad, they can come and see it. They can come and play and stuff like that. So that's something we can look forward to.
That'd be amazing. Well, it's like in the In the Piarco Airport, there's that huge lead pan that has the it's like a sculpture, you know, in the corner.
Yeah.
My wife went over and she was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" Last time we were in Trinidad together, and if that Xylo pan was in one of the corners and everybody who came to Trinidad walked by that, I think they would get a real good sense of like, oh, I'm about to enter a country where this instrument is still being developed, where people are still like it's not done, and there's something about that attitude and that approach that I've always loved about Trinidad, but with pan tuners in particular. So yeah, put it in the airport. That's my first, or somewhere where everybody has to walk by. I think is the goal. Well, let me wrap up here. So we're kind of in this, the weird thing for me with this current COVID mess and the lockdowns and the travel restrictions now is that the last thing I did in public was my bandmates and I came to Trinidad in February and we played with Skiffle Bunch. And so for me, the irony of like the last thing I did in the world was Carnival, and then I went home and was locked down for the last 6 months. It's been this really weird sort of like yin and yang of life, like to be in the most social environment possible of Carnival in Trinidad, and then to go to being locked down. And I'm having these like, you know, Brooklyn Panorama and Carnival is canceled here. I'm starting to have this deep anxiety about whether or not Carnival in Trinidad is going to be canceled, whether Panorama is going to be canceled. Am I going to even be allowed in the country? You know, if I try to fly there. Can you just, what are your thoughts moving forward? Like, this is an interesting moment in the history of humanity, but this is also a time, if you look back at other history, in times of incredible limitations, is usually out of which incredible things come. And I'm curious for you, what are some things that you see growing in the fridge right now of humanity that you think in a year we're gonna see and see for the better?
In terms of the steel pan, I can say, based on the Facebook and stuff like that, we see a lot of new faces or faces that we haven't seen before coming out and playing and stuff like that. So I think that's one of the things we will see in the future. We'll have better players because people have the time now to practice. They saw the Panorama she just finished, and we saw Andre.
That was insane. All of that was insane. That whole Panorama thing, like, to me, that was just like, when I saw that happen, I was just like, yes, like, yeah, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay.
Yeah. So we have a lot of people now practicing to probably come and challenge Andre. So we have
he's got a target on his back now. You better watch out.
We'll have better players, and the Panorama is something I don't know if it'll happen in 2021. We may probably have a scaled down version of the Carnival, maybe no visitors and stuff like that. But I think after the whole thing, we're gonna have something blossoming nice, according to what you said.
Yeah, I'm curious to see when Panorama or Carnival is open back up, the desire people have had for that sort of camaraderie, that sort of celebration, bands getting together to rehearse for months on end. Like, I'm very curious to see how humans, I think we're going to come out of the gates pretty hot, and I think there's going to be some panoramas that are going to be written that will blow the doors off of the old styles. Like I'm really curious to look to people like, of course, like younger generation of folks like, you know, Kendall, Mark, Odie, Mia. Like, there's a bunch of folks who are the younger generations, but I'm really curious to look at like Leon Foster Thomas and Bugsy and some older folks who I think this is going to create some new stuff from them too. And I'm just really psyched. I'm really excited to see how those geniuses, because this art form, like you said, is only 80 years old. So the Mozarts and the Beethovens of the steel band world are alive still. They're going to the store right now in Trinidad. And so they're dealing with this stuff just like you and I are. And I'm just fascinated to see what comes from it, you know?
Yeah. It would be nice to have you remember the Pan is Beautiful?
Yeah.
It would be nice to kick off with one of that, you know? Get some of those classic music again on Pan.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're in a real glut here, I think there's going to be a lot of really good stuff, and I miss it all. But Andy, I'm going to let you go. I took way too much of your time already this morning with Zoom mess, and I would love to. The invite for anybody who's a guest on the podcast is always open. So if there's anything you ever want to talk about, or when you want to reveal your new bass, I would love to have you back on the podcast just to talk more. I think you're an important voice, and I'm really glad that I reached out to you. And I want people to hear you talk about stuff that is happening in Trinidad more often, because I think that is an important part of history, and the way history should be taught is by the people who are actually sitting in the chair right now in Trinidad talking to these people. So keep doing that. I appreciate it. I personally appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're quite welcome. Well, before I let you go, where can people find out specifically? Do you have a website for what you do? Is there a place where people can go, like your Facebook page, anything?
Facebook. There's my Facebook page is Panmax Studios on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And of course, you can catch me at my Facebook page, private Andy A. Niels. So you can contact me on Facebook.
Okay. Well, I'll tell people to look up your page. And man, again, I appreciate your time so much. And I hope the next time I'm in Trinidad, which I hope is this February, I will come knock on your door and we'll meet.
Oh man, anytime, man.
We'll meet and hug in person, okay?
We can have a drink, something. We could probably go on the avenue.
I would love a white oak and coke. A white oak and coke and a bacon shark would absolutely make my soul right now. If I could pull that off. But well, Andy, thank you so much. Take care and be well and stay safe and healthy, okay?
All right, brother. You too.
All right. Thanks, Andy. Okay, this podcast was brought to you by Liquid Drum, liquiddrum.com, down in Waco, Texas, run by Todd Meehan. Todd teaches at Baylor University and runs an amazing website called liquiddrum.com. Hilarity, great education. Check him out. Also, Dunleavy Pans. Kyle Dunleavy builds and tunes all of the steel drums I perform and teach on, both in So Percussion and at Princeton and NYU. Kyle's amazing. Check him out. DunleavyPans.com. DUNLEAVY Pans.com. Also, if you want to learn more about pans, advocacy, steel drum, history, things like that, check out a Brooklyn-based organization called Pan in Motion. And you can find them at paninmotion.com. Trisha, Jerry, Arisha, and Kendall all run an amazing organization down there. Check them out, paninmotion.com. And finally, I have a bunch of steel drum shirts. I don't know if you've seen them on any of the podcasts, but I'll try to sort of demonstrate them more prominently moving forward. They're made by a gentleman in Brooklyn named Alejandre Mirage, and he is amazing. He has a company called Mango Chow, and you can find them on Facebook. That's mango like the fruit, Chow, CHOW. Okay? Hope you're doing well. Take care, stay safe, and be kind to each other. Talk to you soon. Bye.